Welcome to the Colleague Experience podcast episode. Get ready to explore bold insights, experimentation, and groundbreaking leadership strategies that are reshaping the business world. Today, we're diving into the concept of VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and how it's redefining the modern workplace. We'll uncover how organizations can thrive amid rapid technological and social changes by fostering innovation, creativity, and employee engagement. Let's dive in. The concept of VUCA, or in detail, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, needs no introduction. Anyone who lived on Earth during the coronavirus period would have found it hard to miss the renewed revival of this concept, which has since managed to disappear again. The origins of the VUCA concept date back to the early 1990s. According to some opinions, it was invented by the American security system, while other opinions suggest it was invented elsewhere, and they simply adopted it. Either way, with the end of the Cold War, when Americans arrived in Kosovo, Somalia, Yemen, and other places across the globe, they discovered that the old order, that of the Cold War, no longer existed. It was no longer clear who was good and who was bad, who was on our side and who was against us, and even what we could know about reality was temporary and could change rapidly. The 21st century, or at least its first decades, can definitely be classified as the VUCA era. Let us examine several elements that characterize VUCA in the last decade. Elements that challenge classical organizational paradigms. The rate of change that characterizes life in the 21st century was largely outlined by the law named after Gordon Moore. Moore was one of the founders of Intel and even headed it in its early stages. The law named after him, Moore's Law, states that computing power will double every year to year and a half. This law has proven itself over many years, as computers became smaller, cheaper, and at the same time much more powerful. Moore's law essentially establishes that the rate of change of the digital revolution is exponential. This point is interesting because the implications of the digital revolution extend beyond the technological world, and their impact is evident in all areas of our lives. In fact, the digital revolution changes the ecosystem of almost every organization. And naturally, it also affects the system, the way the organization operates and functions. The exponential pace that the digital revolution brought with it has led to the concepts of change or transformation, as we knew them, also changing. The change has changed. The way changes occur in the world is itself now undergoing change. We are no longer in a linear event. We are in an era where intensive technological changes create increasingly frequent social, economic, and political changes. One of the implications derived from this situation is that managements can no longer rely only on themselves to know how to identify all the changes happening in their ecosystem. Managements need more and more partners in managing the event. The immediate candidates to enter under the umbrella of organizational leadership are, of course, the employees in the organization. But for some reason, we often hear managements frustrated that employees are not there, that they do not really take responsibility and become part of leading the organization. In quite a few organizations, management's feeling is that employees would prefer to focus on doing what they are told to do and not be partners in thinking about what is right to do. We've seen this play out dramatically in pharmaceutical companies we've worked with. During the rapid development of COVID-19 vaccines, traditional hierarchical decision-making processes simply couldn't keep pace with the scientific discoveries and regulatory changes happening daily. Companies that succeeded were those that empowered their research teams, regulatory affairs, specialists, and even manufacturing technicians to make real-time decisions and escalate critical insights directly to leadership. One biotech client we worked with discovered that their lab technicians were spotting contamination patterns weeks before the formal quality control reports reached management. But the rigid reporting structure meant this vital information was getting lost in layers of bureaucracy. The rapid pace of change in the VUCA era creates gaps within the organization. Some of these gaps were always there, but now they become more frequent and deeper. What gaps are we talking about? For example, between vision and reality, between the desired and the existing, between past and present, between what exists and what is aspired to, between fast and slow, between important and urgent, and other such gaps. These gaps stem from the organization's difficulty in synchronizing the pace of change between all parts of the system. The time it takes different parts of the organization to adapt themselves to a new situation differs from the time required for other parts of the organization. Sometimes, by the time the last employee understands the meaning of the change, it is no longer relevant. These gaps threaten to put the organization in a state of disintegration. That is, the organization may reach a state where it breaks down into different units, operating without synchronization. Anyone who is not dealing with a silo problem in their organization, please stand up. The audience is asked to sit down. To avoid a state of disintegration, the organization will invest more and more energy in trying to coordinate its internal systems. This will come, of course, at the expense of investing in synchronizing with its ecosystem. That is, at the expense of its growth. So on one hand, the pace of change in the VUCA era requires the organization to invest much more energy to quickly adapt to what is happening in its ecosystem. On the other hand, this pace opens gaps in the organization, which costs even more energy to keep the organization from falling apart. In other words, precisely when the organization needs more energy, the amount of available energy decreases. Since the beginning of the scientific revolution in the 16th century, the status of the individual has been strengthening at the expense of the status of the establishment. In the past, it was the church and monarchy that determined what was truth, what was considered beautiful, and what was the right thing to do. The scientific revolution gave birth to humanism, which centers the human being and not God or the king. The central values of humanism in the 21st century are individual freedom, the right to self-actualization, uniqueness, and so forth. The modern humanist believes that power should be in the possession of the individual, and therefore is suspicious of establishments that might want to harm their freedom. Those born into this era perceive organizations managed through authority, power, bureaucracy, and other institutional characteristics as archaic and irrelevant bodies for them. They will seek systems that give them the freedom to choose and fulfill themselves as individuals. In a paraphrase of Kennedy's statement, they do not ask what they can do for the organization, but what the organization can do for them. Their workplace is another piece in the puzzle of their self-actualization, and the expectation that they will put it above their personal needs sounds absurd to them. This shift has created particular challenges in highly regulated industries. We worked with a pharmaceutical company where younger scientists were frustrated by the rigid protocols required for drug development. They understood the safety imperatives, but the traditional command and control structure felt stifling to them. The breakthrough came when we helped the company redesign their research processes to give individual scientists more autonomy within defined safety parameters. Instead of following cookbook procedures, they could design their own experimental approaches as long as they met specific safety and efficacy checkpoints. This change not only improved employee satisfaction, but actually accelerated their drug development timeline because scientists were more engaged and brought creative solutions to complex problems. The familiar saying, "knowledge is power," is no longer true, or at least not always true. In an era of such rapid information flow, when all human information is available to everyone on the small device we carry everywhere, knowledge is not an advantage. Sometimes knowledge is actually a disadvantage. The engine of the economy in the 21st century is innovation, continuous creation of new knowledge that did not exist before. The good news is that we are very creative beings. The less good news is that our creativity emerges from us under very specific conditions. Our creativity is connected to our passion, to freedom, to desire, to initiative. But as we have seen in the VUCA era, organizations may have a tendency in the opposite direction: disintegration, indifference, and so forth. If we summarize what has been said so far, the organizational challenge of our time is to create a system that has all its energy mobilized to deal with changes in the ecosystem, that is in internal integration, and does not consume too many resources on internal synchronization and coordination, that is not perceived as an establishment that threatens the sense of freedom of employees, and that succeeds in bringing to expression the creativity and innovation of employees. But facing this challenge, we stand with the same management tools that were developed in the last 200 to 300 years, and were designed to deal with a completely different challenge. Let us explain. The Industrial Revolution led to the development of the first large business organizations. The challenge of those who headed these organizations was to teach those who were, until a moment before, small farmers working in small, family groups, to work together in full coordination in very large groups of workers. We must remember that we are talking about the 18th and 19th centuries, and at that time, the main resource that workers brought with them to work was their muscles. So in fact, the central task of management was to turn workers into a kind of robots. In fact, this was the purpose for which modern management was invented, whose central principles we maintain to this day: to make hundreds and thousands of people work together like a well-oiled machine. But human beings are no longer robots. If in the past, organizations expected their employees to bring their muscles to work in the morning, today, you want them to bring their hearts. If in the past, managers had to invest most of their energy in making the organization meet targets through order, discipline, planning, control, motivation, and so forth, today, they are required to create an organization that has quality, professional people who come to work in the morning because they love their workplace. As we said, organizations that suit human beings. And that's a wrap for today's podcast. We've explored how the VUCA world challenges organizations to adapt with agility and foster innovation, emphasizing the importance of aligning internal systems and meeting new employee expectations. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.